After the coronation, Zulfiqar Khan actively persecuted dozens of those nobles who had supported the dead princes. Most were imprisoned in Delhi and their property confiscated. 2 emirs, however, were publicly executed. This is the first time that nobles on the losing side were punished. In the past, only the royal contenders and their progeny were killed and their property seized. New distortions in the system marked this second succession struggle to occur within 5 years. John F. Richards, The Mughal Empire. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Season 9 of the Islamic History Podcast. This season, we are continuing our discussion on the Mughal Empire. This is episode 9-15, Farrukh Siyar's Revolt. Let's begin with a brief recap of the previous episode. A succession dispute in the Maratha kingdom leads to a civil war. For a while at least, the Marathas are not a problem for the Mughals. After the death of Guru Gobind Singh, the Sikhs rise up against the Mughals. They brutally attack several towns, leading to the deaths of thousands of Muslims. Emperor Bahadur Shah dies in 1712, and another fratricidal war breaks out between his 4 sons. 3 of his sons, Jahandar Shah, Rafiul Shan, and Jahan Shah, team up against the strongest brother, Azimul Shan. After defeating Azim, the alliance falls apart and Jahandar Shah, supported by the powerful noble Zulfiqar Khan, emerges as the victor. Meanwhile, Azim's son, Farrukh Siyar, is forming an alliance with the ambitious and powerful Sayyid brothers in Bihar. In a major break from tradition, Jahandar Shah and Zulfiqar Khan imprison or execute not only their rivals, but also the nobles that supported them. And now with that, let's get into the story of Jahandar Shah and his downfall. Lal Kunwar. The new emperor Jahandar Shah was infatuated with a dancing girl named Lal Kunwar. We briefly mentioned her in the previous episode, and now that Jahandar Shah was emperor, she had become his chief consort. Lal Kunwar was given the title Imtiyazul Mahal, which means esteem of the palace. Jahandar Shah bestowed her with large estates, money, jewelry. He even gave her the crimson umbrella, which was usually held exclusive for members of the imperial house of Timur. Her relatives were also granted high positions, as well as the privilege of playing the royal drums while moving through town. This was very odd and unseemly because Lal Kunwar and her family were commoners. They were not members of the nobility and had not done anything significant to earn these privileges. Now, despite Lal Kunwar's high rank, Zinatun Nisa, who was the last surviving daughter of Emperor Aurangzeb, was still the lady of the royal house. That is, she was the empress. This was a title that had been bestowed upon her during Bahadur Shah's reign. Zinatun Nisa, unsurprisingly, couldn't stand Lal Kunwar and used every available opportunity to insult her. This, however, created a rift between Zinatun Nisa and her nephew, that is the Emperor Jahandar Shah, who stopped talking to her. Emperor Jahandar Shah would also hold these wild drinking parties with Lal Kunwar and her family and friends where they drank until they passed out. The emperor and Lal Kunwar would also take secret trips into the city where they would get drunk and often pass out in public. It was not a good look for the emperor to be seen unconscious in public with a former dancing girl. There's one story where Emperor Jahandar Shah and Lal Kunwar were relaxing by a river watching boats go by. Lal Kunwar just happened to mention that she had never seen a man drown. And so she ordered one of the boats in the river to be capsized and the men drowned just to satisfy her curiosity. There's another story where one of her friends, perhaps another dancing girl, her name was Zohra, and she insulted a man named Chin Kalish Khan. We mentioned him in the previous episode. Chinchkalish Khan was the former governor of Bijapur and the son of the blind general Ghaziuddin Feroz Jung. This woman, this associate of Lal Kunwar, called Chinchkalish Khan the son of a blind man, and Chinchkalish Khan's men beat her up for her insult. But Chinchkalish Khan knew that this could be trouble. First of all, he had not yet paid homage to the new emperor. He had not gone to Jahandar Shah and submitted to him as a subject. If Zohra complained to Lal Kunwar would go and complain to Emperor Jahandar Shah, and then Chinchkalish Khan could expect some trouble to come his way. Chinchkalish Khan preemptively went to Zulfiqar Khan to give his side of the story, and he also made sure to note that he was concerned about the negative influence surrounding the new emperor. And by this, of course, he meant Lal Kunwar and her family and her associates. Zulfiqar Khan, like most of the other nobility, was also fed up with Jahandar Shah hanging out with such low-class people. So he wrote a strongly worded note warning the emperor, warning Jahandar Shah not to do anything to Chinchkalish Khan. He warned him that doing so would be an insult to the nobility. And Jahandar Shah got the message and he understood the implied threat. Basically, this letter was telling him that if he did anything to Chinchkalish Khan, the nobility might turn against him and he might be faced with a revolt. So Jahandar Shah wisely ignored Zohra and Lal Kunwar's complaints about the matter. Nonetheless, there was still a lot of consternation, concern, raised eyebrows within the nobility about the new emperor's infatuation with this dancing girl, Lal Kunwar. They were also concerned and worried and upset about the crazy rise of Lal Kunwar's family from musicians and performers to the nobility class. The Revolt of Farrukh Siyar. As we mentioned in the previous episode, Farrukh Siyar and his army were in Bihar where the Sayyid brothers pledged their support for him. With the Sayyid brothers backing him, Farrukh Siyar proclaimed himself emperor, had coins minted, and then had the khutbah read in his name. Then he promised to make the two Sayyid brothers his prime minister and army paymaster once he captured the throne. Meanwhile, Jahandar Shah, the current emperor, had appointed a new governor for Allahabad, a man named Abdul Ghaffar. Now, back in episode 13, we mentioned how Bahadur Shah had made Hassan Ali Khan, that is, Abdullah Khan, governor of this province, the province of Allahabad. Hassan Ali Khan, also known as Abdullah Khan, he was the elder of the two Sayyid brothers. We're just going to call him Sayyid Abdullah to make it easy to differentiate him from the other brother. So Abdul Ghaffar was arriving to take over Allahabad, and Sayyid Abdullah sent an army to intercept him. Within this army included three of Sayyid Abdullah's younger brothers who were also Sayyids, along with the elite troops from the Badha Sayyids. Included within this army were three of Sayyid Abdullah's younger brothers, along with elite troops from the Badha Sayyids. I'm mentioning a lot of names. I'm going to try to differentiate some things for you. Badha is the name of the family that these Sayyids belong to. Sayyid Abdullah, Sayyid Hussein, and the three brothers in the army, they belong to the Badha family. That was the name of the family. Sayyid is a title that's often given to descendants of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. However, I want to make it clear that it is very unlikely that these guys were truly descendants of the Prophet. Most likely this is just some fabrication someone in their ancestors had made up. Anyway, there was a brief skirmish between Abdul Ghaffar, that is Jahandar Shah's new governor for Allahabad, and the existing governor, the current governor, Sayyid Abdullah of the Sayyid brothers. There was a brief skirmish between the two sides, and one of the younger Badha brothers was killed. However, Abdul Ghaffar was forced to turn back, and he was not able to take his place as the governor of Allahabad. When Jahandar Shah learned what happened, he sent a conciliatory letter to the Badha family trying to reconcile with them. But the damage had already been done, and there was a rising tide of anger and resentment from the empire's noble class against its new emperor. More and more nobles were starting to side with Farrukh Siyar, including many of his father's supporters. Remember, Farrukh Siyar was the son of Azim, who was the son of Bahadur Shah. With these nobles rallying around Farrukh Siyar, he was able to raise a strong army, and on September 22nd, 1712, the army started marching towards Delhi. Just to give you the logistics of how this was working out, Farrukh Siyar was in Bihar, which is about 600 miles east of Delhi, going east from Delhi towards Bengal. Allahabad was roughly in the middle, about 300 miles east of Delhi and 300 miles west of Bihar. So the army left Bihar and reached Allahabad on November 5th, where Sayyid Abdullah and his men joined them. Remember, Sayyid Abdullah had led the army to intercept Abdul Ghaffar, who was Jahandar Shah's new governor for Allahabad, but he never was able to take his place. When news of the approaching army reached Delhi, Jahandar Shah decided to send his son Azuddin to meet it and go fight it. But Azuddin had no experience. And so both Zulfiqar Khan and Azuddin himself protested against this idea and said this was a bad idea because Azuddin didn't know what he was doing. Jahandar Shah, for some reason, decided to send Khani Duran along with Azuddin. Khani Duran was related to Kolkatash. Kolkatash was Jahandar's foster brother who also wanted to be the prime minister, but could not because Zulfiqar Khan held that position. But the thing is that Khani Duran was also inexperienced and incompetent to boot. So here was Jahandar Shah sending two incompetent commanders to lead an army against Farrukh Siyar and the Sayyid brothers who kind of knew what they were doing. In addition to the incompetence and the inexperience of the leadership of this army coming from Jahandar Shah, the army was also rife with bickering and rivalries. This chaos was created by Farrukh Siyar's spies who had secretly infiltrated Jahandar Shah's army. Well, the two armies finally clashed at Kajuha on November 25th, 1712. What happened next shows the inexperience of the leadership of this army. Once Farrukh Siyar's artillery opened up on the imperial army, Khani Duran, the guy who Jahandar Shah had sent to help his son Azuddin, Khani Duran, who had never seen battle before, lost his nerve and started telling Azuddin, "We got to get out of here. We have to withdraw." Now, Azuddin, to his credit, initially he refused to do so. He wanted to stand his ground. But over time, eventually, he was convinced that this was the right thing to do. 2 days later, in the middle of the night, Khani Duran, Azuddin, his wife, and a small escort fled into the night while his surviving soldiers were still sleeping. He left his wealth behind, he left his harem behind, he left his soldiers behind, and these guys did not stop running until they reached Agra. When the army woke up the next morning and realized their leadership, their commanders, Azuddin and Khani Duran, had fled, they also abandoned the fight. Now Emperor Jahandar Shah was desperate. He begged Chinchkalish Khan, that was the guy who had been insulted by Zohra Lal Kunwar's buddy. He begged Chinchkalish Khan and the other Turani nobles for help. Remember, Turani meant people who were originally from Central Asia. Chinchkalish Khan and these nobles, even if they wanted to help, and many of them didn't want to help, Jahandar Shah no longer had an army. They had dispersed. And he needed to raise a new army, but in order to do so, he needed money. So they went down to the treasury of Agra, opened it up, and found that it was completely empty. And to this day, no one knows exactly what happened to all of the wealth that had supposedly been accumulating since the time of Babur. So now Jahandar Shah, he had no choice but to start collecting the family jewels and personal gold items to raise an army. He was able to eventually do so, and Zulfiqar Khan led the army towards Agra to confront Farrukh Siyar and the Sayyid brothers. Jahandar Shah and Lal Kunwar went along with Zulfiqar Khan as well. Zulfiqar Khan, however, believed that the rebels, that is Farrukh Siyar and the Sayyid brothers and their army, he believed that they would be tired after such a long march. But what he did not know was that Farrukh Siyar had already contacted the nobility in the area and struck deals with them. So Chin Kalish Khan and the Turani nobles had agreed to remain neutral in the war between Jahandar Shah and Farrukh Siyar. On January 7th, 1713, Farrukh Siyar's army crossed the river near Sikandra west of Agra, while the imperial army waited at Samugarh east of Agra. The battle took place on January 10th, 1713. During the early phases of the battle, Sayyid Hussein, that's one of the Sayyid brothers, was injured and rumors spread that he had been killed. This news caused Farrukh Siyar's army to waver, and for a moment, it seemed as if the imperial army just might win. However, the Sayyid brothers rallied and launched a daring attack on the imperial forces, which boosted the rebel army's courage. And now, as momentum swung in the rebels' favor, Lal Kunwar reached over to the emperor and said, "We need to go." She advised the emperor it is time to get out of here. She had no desire to die in battle. The emperor, to his credit, I guess, took her advice and jumped into the howdah on her elephant, and they both fled the battle. Zulfiqar Khan had no idea that his emperor and his emperor's wife had fled the battle. Zulfiqar Khan continued to direct the army and manage the fight, but when he realized that the emperor and Lal Kunwar were no longer there, he also fled with the remainder of the army back to Delhi. Meanwhile, current emperor Jahandar Shah disguised himself by shaving his beard and putting on normal clothes. He dropped off Lal Kunwar at Kolkata's home, that's his foster brother's home, and then he went to the home of Asad Khan, that is Zulfiqar Khan's father, seeking refuge. He arrived really late at night, looking crazy and in horrible shape with his face shaved and wearing these bad clothes. It took him a while to actually convince the guards that he really was the emperor. Well, Asad Khan came down to expect, and he recognized the emperor, and he invited Jahandar Shah in. And not too long after Jahandar Shah arrived, Zulfiqar Khan also arrived at his father's house. And so father and son, Asad Khan and Zulfiqar Khan, they began discussing their next moves. And what happens next is probably not going to surprise you. Asad Khan, the father, he wanted to turn Jahandar Shah over to Farrukh Siyar. It was obvious that the game was over. Farrukh Siyar had won. He was going to take the throne, and from Asad Khan's perspective, they needed to jump on this wave while they could. Zulfiqar Khan, however, was still holding some loyalty to his emperor. He wanted to escape with Jahandar Shah to perhaps Multan or Kabul or the Deccan and try to raise another army and go back and fight again. But inevitably, unsurprisingly, Asad Khan convinced his son to betray the emperor. Asad Khan's men grabbed Jahandar Shah and threw him into prison, and then the old man sent a message to Farrukh Siyar congratulating him, letting him know, "I got the former emperor for you," and then he had the khutbah read in Farrukh Siyar's name. After the Battle of Agra. The next day, Farrukh Siyar held court in Agra, and the khutbah was read in his name. Azuddin, that is, Jahandar Shah's son, was discovered hiding in Dada Shiko's mansion in Agra. He was quickly captured and blinded. As promised, Farrukh Siyar appointed Sayyid Abdullah as his new prime minister, and Sayyid Abdullah went on to Asad Khan's home in Delhi to take custody of Jahandar Shah. His brother, Sayyid Hussein Ali, was declared the Bakshi, or the army paymaster. However, Sayyid Hussein Ali was still recovering from the wounds he had sustained during the battle, so he would be incapacitated for a while. Other nobles were also given significant positions. A man named Shariatullah Khan was titled Mir Jumla. Khwaja Asim was given the title of Khani Dauran. And then Taqarrub Khan became Miri Saman, or the Minister of Logistics. If that name sounds familiar, Taqarrub Khan was the former prime minister for Kambakhsh during his brief reign in the Deccan. Now, these three nobles did not trust the Sayyid brothers nor the power that they suddenly held in the empire, and they decided to form an alliance against them. Let's read an excerpt that summarizes this change in administration. The usurper, only marginally less debauched, but probably more evil even than his predecessor, now established a reign of terror in which quite a number of high-ranking nobles were executed. Such executions, however, only worsened Farrukh Siyar's fundamental problems: his own indecisiveness, lack of talent and weakness of character, and his heavy reliance on two mighty courtiers and kingmakers, the so-called Sayyid brothers, Sayyid Hassan Ali Khan Barha (1666 to 1722) and Sayyid Hussein Khan Barha (1668 to 1720). These two competent but dangerously ambitious and utterly ruthless men had been governors of Allahabad and Patna respectively. Their military support had helped Farrukh Siyar gain the throne, as a result of which they had been rewarded with the highest offices, but the king quickly became apprehensive of their power. His treacherous, but ineffective, attempts to get rid of them would ultimately seal his doom. Dirk Collier, The Mughals and Their India. So from this excerpt, we understand that Farrukh Siyar was starting to get kind of apprehensive about the Sayyid brothers also, and that he tries but fails to try to get rid of them. Let's see how that happens. Farrukh Siyar is now on the throne, and as we probably come to expect, it's time for the bloody retributions to begin. While he was in Delhi to take custody of Jahandar Shah, the former emperor, Sayyid Abdullah met with Zulfiqar Khan, and he talked with him and persuaded him and his father to seek the emperor's forgiveness. It had been the norm previously, before Jahandar Shah broke the system. It had been the norm to forgive and sometimes even restore titles to nobles from the losing side. This would ensure their loyalty for the new regime. Jahandar Shah, as we mentioned, had broken this rule by killing some of the nobles under his brothers. The three nobles that we mentioned above, however, did not really like this idea. They were really worried about an alliance between the Sayyid brothers and Zulfiqar Khan and his father Asad Khan. That would be just too influential, too powerful, and too dangerous. We have already seen that Zulfiqar Khan could be very ruthless himself. And the Sayyid brothers, as we'll soon see, inshallah, they weren't too far behind. And Asad Khan, I mean, come on. He had been so quick to betray Jahandar Shah as soon as he saw that momentum was shifting. With this concern, the alliance of the three nobles that we had mentioned earlier, Shariatullah Khan, Khwaja Asim, Taqarrub Khan, they began whispering in Farrukh Siyar's ears, turning him against Zulfiqar Khan. So when Asad Khan and Zulfiqar Khan came to meet with Farrukh Siyar, he welcomed them, he hugged them, and he gave them all sorts of gifts. And then Emperor Farrukh Siyar asked Asad Khan to leave the room for a while so he could speak with Zulfiqar Khan privately. And as soon as Asad Khan was gone, Farrukh Siyar's guards jumped out and beat Zulfiqar Khan to death. Meanwhile, the deposed emperor Jahandar Shah was taken from his cell to the execution room and strangled to death with a tasma, that is, a Turkish bowstring. As for Lal Kunwar, the former emperor's chief consort, some say that she remained with him until the end and had to be forcibly separated from him. But other stories say that she quietly left right before Jahandar Shah went to Asad Khan's home in Delhi, and that she was never seen again. Jahandar Shah's head was removed from his body, placed on a pike, and paraded through the city. And then his headless body was placed on top of an elephant. As for the former emperor's primary advisor, Zulfiqar Khan, his body was tied to the foot of that same elephant. And you know what happens when an elephant steps on something. As the elephant walked, Zulfiqar Khan's body was squished beneath its weight. Eventually, both bodies were taken and dumped outside the city gates. But Farrukh Siyar was not done yet. He sent his men throughout the city to round up every single prince they could find. This included his own little brother, who was only 13 years old. All of these princes were either blinded or killed. And in this manner, Farrukh Siyar made sure that there were no other rivals to the throne. Ajit Singh. Emperor Farrukh Siyar had also appointed a man named Ajit Singh the Rajput Raja of Marwar as the governor of Gujarat. We have discussed Ajit Singh before back in episodes 9-10 and 9-12. Ajit Singh had been brought to Delhi as a child to be raised in the Mughal court, but his mother escaped with him because she was afraid that he'd be raised as a Muslim. In 1713, Farrukh Siyar ordered Ajit Singh to transfer to Tata, which is in southern Pakistan. Ajit Singh refused to transfer, he refused this order, and so Emperor Farrukh Siyar sent Sayyid Hussain, one of the Sayyid brothers, the younger of the two Sayyid brothers, with an army to go punish him. Farrukh Siyar also sent his uncle Shaista Khan along with the Sayyid. This was because Farrukh Siyar wanted to get Sayyid Hussain killed. He was hoping that if fighting broke out between the Rajputs and the imperial army, Sayyid Hussain would be killed because the odds were stacked up against them. But this plan did not quite work out. As soon as he saw the imperial army approaching, Ajit Singh got scared and immediately asked to negotiate a truce. Shaista Khan agreed to negotiate, but because he was also trying to get Sayyid Hussain killed, he set these near impossible conditions. He was hoping to provoke a clash between the two armies and make it easier to get rid of Sayyid Hussain. One of the conditions that Shaista Khan had given was that Ajit Singh's daughter would marry the Emperor Farrukh Siyar. In addition to this, she would also have to convert to Islam. Shaista Khan felt there was no way Ajit Singh would accept these terms, and he would definitely reject them, and the war would start and Sayyid Hussain could be eliminated. But Ajit Singh was so afraid of the imperial army, he agreed to these conditions, and these guys had to follow through with the promise. And so now Ajit Singh found himself as the father-in-law of the Mughal emperor. Dealing with the Sikhs. In the previous episode, we mentioned how Bahadur Shah had led the imperial army and had defeated the Sikhs led by Banda Bairagi. However, Banda Bairagi managed to escape along with several of his soldiers, and they settled in Jammu. This is just north of the Punjab region of modern Pakistan. In 1713, a man named Abdul Samad Khan was appointed as the governor of Lahore. Farrukh Siyar gave him the orders to deal with the Sikh rebellion that was still going on. Abdul Samad Khan defeated the Sikhs at Sadora, which is about 110 miles north of Delhi, in October 1713, but once again, Banda Bairagi escaped. Banda then constructed a fort named Gurdaspur in the Doab area, which is just south of Jammu. Gurdaspur is a combination of three words, Guru Daspura, and it means the city of the Guru's servants. In April 1715, the imperial army arrived and put this new fort at Gurdaspur under siege. The siege was so bad and so severe that the Sikhs within the fort began to starve. They had eaten all available animals, and even when the animals were all gone, they ground up the animals' bones and ate that as well. Now, surprisingly, eventually disease and sickness began to spread among the Sikhs in the fort. Finally, on December 17th, 1715, Banda Bairagi surrendered to the imperial army. As soon as they surrendered, hundreds of Sikhs were beheaded right there on the spot. Their heads were loaded into ox carts, then raised on pikes as a warning to others, and their bodies were left behind to rot. Those Sikh prisoners who were not executed were paraded through the streets of Lahore and Delhi, dressed in animal skins, seated on donkeys with dunce caps on their heads. But it's not over yet. Banda Bairagi, the Sikh leader, was brought before Emperor Farrukh Siyar in Delhi. One of the nobles, a man named Muhammad Amin Khan, asked Banda Bairagi, the Sikh leader, why did he kill so many innocent Muslims? We mentioned the brutal devastation that the Sikhs had put upon the Muslims in the previous episode. Banda replied that this is what happens in all religions, in all faiths. When people become corrupt and wicked and oppressive, God sends someone as a scourge. And this scourge is meant to punish those wicked people. But once the punishment is complete, God then sends men like this noble Muhammad Amin Khan to stop the scourge. Muhammad Amin Khan then asked the Sikh leader, what oppression was he referring to? And Banda replied that the emperor, he pointed to the emperor had killed or blinded many of his own cousins and had even blinded his own little brother. When Farrukh Siyar heard this, he went into a rage and ordered Banda thrown into the dungeons and had him tortured. And then all of his remaining followers who were in custody, they were given the choice to accept Islam or be executed. Obviously, none of them took this offer, and the executions began on March 15th, 1716. The executions lasted for about a week, and finally, on June 19th, 1716, Banda Bairagi himself was publicly tortured and executed. The EIC and the Emperor. Emperor Farrukh Siyar appointed a man named Murshid Quli Khan as governor of Bengal. If that name sounds familiar, that's because we have spoken about him before. We discussed Murshid Quli Khan in episode 6 of this season. He was a Hindu who had converted to Shia Islam, and he had helped Aurangzeb fix the Deccan's horrible financial situation back when Aurangzeb was still governor of the Deccan before he became the emperor. Murshid Quli Khan did not trust the English in Bengal, and he demanded that they pay poll taxes just like all the other traders in the region. Well, the EIC, they sent a delegation to meet with the emperor to protest what they considered unjust taxation, unfair taxation. And as it happened, Emperor Farrukh Siyar was suffering from some sickness when the English delegation arrived. The emperor's Indian doctors had not been able to heal him. And again, as it happened, amongst the English delegation was a Scottish doctor named William Hamilton. William Hamilton offered to treat Emperor Farrukh Siyar, and soon after, the emperor started feeling better. Farrukh Siyar was so grateful that he asked the doctor to name his reward. And William Hamilton asked for the following. He asked for all taxes that had been levied on the East India Company to be levied. He asked for permission for the EIC to acquire even more land in Bengal, and he asked for permission for the EIC to mint their own coins, using the emperor's mints, but not using the emperor's coins. And in 1717, Farrukh Siyar granted all of Dr. Hamilton's requests. Before we wrap up, I want to talk about a family called the Jagat Seths. The Jagat Seths were a prominent and influential group of bankers and financiers in India. The term Jagat Seth was actually an honorific title given to the family, and it means banker of the world. This family, the Jagat Seth family, originated from the Marwar region of modern-day Rajasthan, India, and they practiced Jainism. The Jagat Seth family was very successful. They were very wealthy merchants, and they helped to conduct and facilitate extensive trade and banking activities during the Mughal era. The Jagat Seths played a significant role in financing the Mughal government. They funded various Mughal military campaigns, and they helped to manage the empire's financial affairs. The Jagat Seths were middlemen and financiers for global trade networks passing through India. They acted as intermediaries, basically, between the Mughal administration and the European trading companies, especially the EIC. And they also helped to finance trade between India and Europe. Between 1718 and 1730, the EIC borrowed almost 500,000 rupees a year from the Jagat Seths. I'm going to read an excerpt that further describes the influence of the Jagat Seths. As the country grew increasingly anarchic, Murshid Quli Khan found innovative ways to get the annual tribute to Delhi. No longer did he send caravans of bullion guarded by battalions of armed men. The roads were now too disordered for that. Instead, he used the credit networks of a family of Marwari Oswal Jain financiers originally from Nagar in Jodhpur state, to whom in 1722 the emperor had awarded the title Jagat Seths, the bankers of the world, as a hereditary distinction. controlling the minting, collection, and transfer of the revenues of the empire's richest province from their magnificent Murshidabad palace. The Jagat Sets exercised influence and power that were second only to the governor himself, and they soon came to achieve a reputation akin to that of the Rothschilds in 19th century Europe. The historian Ghulam Hussain Khan believed that their wealth was such that there is no mentioning it without seeming to exaggerate and to deal in extravagant fables. A Bengali poet wrote, "As the Ganges pours its water into the sea by 100 mouths, so wealth flowed into the treasury of the Sets." Company commentators were equally dazzled. The historian Robert Orme, who knew Bengal intimately, described the then Jagat Set as the greatest shroff and banker in the known world. William Dalrymple, The Anarchy, The Relentless Rise of the East India Company. So that's going to end it for today. Inshallah, in the next and final episode of this season, we will discuss the growing chaos in the Mughal dynasty as multiple emperors rise and fall.